Did you just take the December administration of the digital SAT? And if you did it feel harder than usual? If so, you're not alone. I conducted an informal poll of my students, and here are the results. 37.8% said the test felt harder than usual. 44.4% said it felt about the same. And 17.8% said the test felt easier than usual. So while this administration of the digital SAT doesn't appear to have been exceptionally hard, it does appear to have been slightly on the harder side. But was it actually harder than usual? I'm Nathan Greenberg, founder of Ivy League Mentors, and in this video I'm going to share 5 theories about why the latest administration of the SAT may have felt harder or easier than usual. I'm also going to explain what each of these theories means for you, the test taker. Finally, I'm going to help you answer some important questions, like whether you should cancel your score, or whether you should retake the test. So make sure to stick around until the end. Now let's jump into it. Theory number 1, adaptive testing. The digital SAT is an adaptive test. For each section, you get 2 modules, and if you perform well on the first module, they give you a harder version of the second module. I bring this up because if the test felt harder than usual, it could actually be a good sign, because it could mean that you got the harder second module. And if the test felt easier than usual, it could actually be a bad sign, because it could mean that you didn't do well enough on the first module to get the harder second module. Realistically speaking, if you get the harder second module, you can afford to get basically every question on it wrong and still get a section score of close to 600 out of 800. Conversely, if you get the easier second module, you're probably not going to break 600, even if you get every question right.
Mr. Greenberg! Mr. Greenberg!
Hello there, student me.
No offense, but I don't think that's the reason in my case. I mean, I've been practicing a lot on Blue Book, and I always get the harder second module. So shouldn't I be used to it by now?
And if that's your case, we'll have to move on to the next theory. Theory number 2. Experimental questions. A lot of students aren't aware of this, but on every module of the SAT, there are 2 experimental questions. Basically, these are new questions that the College Board is trying to test out, and to do that, they make you the guinea pig. The difficulty of these experimental questions can vary considerably. Sometimes they're exceptionally easy, other times they're exceptionally hard. In fact, because they haven't been thoroughly tested, they may even have flaws that make them virtually unsolvable. Now, the good news is that these experimental questions do not affect your score. Unfortunately, they don't tell you which questions are the experimental questions, because they know that if they did, you wouldn't bother to solve them. Anyway, my point is that the whole test may have felt easier or harder than usual, just because the experimental questions were easier or harder than usual, even though that won't actually end up affecting your score. Theory number 3, variations in difficulty. Some administrations of the SAT feel easier or harder than normal because they actually are easier or harder than normal.
Mr. Greenberg, isn't that completely unfair?
Well, it may seem that way, but actually not. You see, even though different administrations of the test vary in terms of difficulty, scores are virtually consistent between administrations, and there's a good reason for that. The algorithm doesn't just take into account which module you got. It also takes into account how hard the test makers think a particular administration of the test is going to be. So on a particularly easy administration of the test, getting just one question wrong, especially in math, could knock you back 20 or 30 points. Whereas on a particularly hard administration of the test, you could afford to get a question wrong and still may get a perfect score. So the important takeaway here is that maybe the test really was easier or harder than normal, but that shouldn't impact your score. Theory number 4, familiarity with the questions. So it's widely known that the College Board has gotten lazy and has been repeating questions from test to test. This means that if you've been studying a lot, you may see questions you've already solved before appear again on the actual test. And that familiarity will make those questions feel easier. How many questions does the College Board repeat? Well, that varies considerably, which is one of the reasons why it can affect how difficult a particular administration of the test feels. If a particular administration has a lot of repeated questions, it will feel relatively easy. And if it has few or no repeated questions, it will feel relatively hard. Of course, familiarity with the questions can also influence the perceived difficulty of the practice materials. If you're practicing a lot, you may see some of the same questions from the question bank reappear on an exercise on Khan Academy, and again on one of the official tests through Blue Book, which is one of the reasons why, if a particular administration has few or no repeated questions, it could feel a lot harder than what you're used to. For what it's worth, on this particular administration of the test, I've already heard rumors of repeated questions, but I've yet to verify them. For those of you watching who actually took the test, did you notice any? If so, tell me all about it in the comments. Theory number 5. It's real. Let's face it, maybe you tried to practice under test-like conditions, with the real time limit and no extra breaks, but the real test always ends up feeling different. Because it's the real test. Just knowing that a test is real can add a lot of pressure, and that pressure can distract you from the test itself. Like if you're wasting mental energy trying to calculate how many questions you got right, and whether or not your score will be good enough to get into Harvard, you're probably not focusing enough on the questions themselves. On the other hand, I've had a lot of students who actually perform better under pressure, and I think that's because they're motivated to give it their all. Like on a practice test, if you finish a module 5 minutes early, you're probably just going to take a nap or skip to the next section. But on the real test, you're almost certainly going to use that time reviewing your answers carefully. And that extra focus and attention can make the test seem easier. Anyway, my point is that there's no way to realistically simulate the emotional experience of taking the real test, which is one of the reasons why the real test may seem easier or harder than what you're used to. So in short, there are a number of reasons why the test may have felt easier or harder than you were expecting. And most of them don't actually have much influence on your ultimate score. That said, if you're absolutely convinced that your score is going to be bad, one option you have is to cancel it. In general, I would only advise you to do this if something major went wrong. For example, your computer broke in the middle of the test, or you had the flu and were throwing up. I certainly wouldn't cancel just because the test felt hard, or because somebody on Reddit says that you got a question wrong. In fact, I've had a ton of students tell me that the test felt hard, but then when they wait 2 weeks and get their scores, they're pleasantly surprised. And even if you don't do as well as you're hoping, that score report you get from the College Board may provide valuable insights about what to focus on next time. And while I'm on the subject of next time, I've recently released a textbook, Digital SAT Reading and Writing, The Ultimate Guide. Now, I may be a little bit biased, but I'm pretty sure it's the best resource out there when it comes to reading and writing on the Digital SAT. And for now, you can get it at a 25% discount. I'll leave a link and a promo code in the description. We also have a bunch of free resources on our website, Ivy League Mentors Prep, so be sure to check them out too. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And to those of you who actually took the test, leave a comment down below and let me know how it went. Thanks as always for watching, and good luck.